This happened when I was 12 years old. It was Halloween day, and my family was staying at a small family resort about an hour away from where we lived. My parents wanted to do something different that year instead of just walking around our neighborhood for trick-or-treating. The resort was holding a Halloween celebration that weekend with a bunch of activities, games, and even a haunted hayride. It wasn't a big place. It had maybe 10 cabins, a main lodge, a small lake, and a long open field where they set up hayrides and games. It was surrounded by woods on all sides. During the day, it looked normal, even kind of peaceful, but once it got dark, the woods looked black and creepy, and the resort felt a little too quiet. We checked in early that afternoon. I remember walking into the cabin and feeling excited because I could smell campfire smoke and candy apples in the air. Kids were running around in costumes even though it wasn't dark yet. My parents said the hayride was starting around 7 and there'd be games before that, so I went off to play while they unpacked. They had booths where you could toss rings over bottles for candy, a costume contest, and even a pumpkin carving area. Everything was decorated with orange lights and fake spiderwebs. I met another kid around my age there. His name was Ryan. He was wearing a skeleton costume and said he and his parents were staying in the next cabin over from ours. We played a few games together and got a good amount of candy. As it got closer to 7, we saw a crowd of families walking over to the hayride area. The tractor pulling the wagon was parked near a big barn, and they had hay bales lined up inside for people to sit on. There were maybe 20 of us who got on. The driver wore a scarecrow mask, and there were workers dressed like zombies who would jump out during the ride to scare people. The ride started out fun. It was dark by then, and they had torches lighting the dirt trail. The tractor moved slowly through the woods, and every now and then, someone in a costume would appear from behind a tree or run up to the wagon. Most people laughed or screamed and then laughed again. It felt like a normal Halloween attraction, but about halfway through, something made me uncomfortable. We were passing through a part of the trail that was darker than the rest. The tractor slowed down, and I looked toward the edge of the woods on my side. That's when I saw a man standing just outside the torchlight. He wasn't part of the hayride cast. I could tell that right away. He wasn't wearing a costume that fit the theme. From what I remember, he had a black jacket, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He was just standing there, not moving, with his hands in his pockets. At first, I thought maybe he was one of the workers taking a break, but he wasn't doing anything. He was only watching. At one point, I made eye contact with him, or at least I think I did. Even though his face was shadowed, I could feel his eyes locked on me. I turned to look at the people around me to see if anyone else noticed, but no one seemed to. When I looked back, he was still there, in the exact same position. I tried to ignore it for the rest of the ride, but I kept thinking about him. When the hayride ended and everyone got off, I looked back one more time toward the woods. He was gone. I didn't mention it to anyone right then. I figured maybe I imagined it or overreacted. We went back to the lodge where they had more games and food. My parents sat by a bonfire while Ryan and I went around collecting candy. Everything seemed normal again. About an hour later, I saw him again. Ryan and I were standing near the snack table when I noticed someone off to the side of the crowd. It was the same man. He wasn't close, maybe 30 feet away, but he was standing near the tree line, watching again. There were a lot of people around, so it felt strange that he'd just be standing there alone. I remember my stomach tightening when I realized he was looking in my direction. I tried to get a better look at his face, but it was hard because of the lighting. I could make out a short beard, and I think his hat had some kind of logo on it. I nudged Ryan and told him about the guy. Ryan looked over and said, "Maybe he's one of the workers." I said, "He's not. He was in the woods during the hayride." Ryan shrugged and said, "Maybe he's a dad." I wanted to believe that, but he wasn't talking to anyone. Just standing there. A few minutes later, when I looked back again, he was gone. Around 9 o'clock if I had to guess, most of the little kids had gone back to their cabins. The event was winding down, but Ryan and I still had energy. We decided to walk around the resort before going in. There was a trail behind the cabins that led into the woods. Ryan said we should go a little way in to do something scary for Halloween before the night ended. I didn't want to go too far, but we had flashlights and I didn't want to look like a coward. So we walked down the dirt path together, laughing and daring each other to keep going. The farther we went, the quieter it got. The sounds from the resort faded until it was just the crunching of our shoes on the path. We only went maybe 200 feet in when we stopped near a clearing. There was an old wooden sign nailed to a tree that said private property. We started throwing small rocks at the sign and pretending to summon ghosts or something dumb like that. Then we both heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, slow footsteps coming from behind us, somewhere deeper on the path. We froze and turned around. Ryan whispered, "Probably another kid." But it didn't sound like a kid. Whoever it was walked with weight, like an adult. I shined my flashlight down the path. The light only went so far, and I couldn't see anyone yet. Then the footsteps stopped. For a few seconds, it was completely silent. Then a voice spoke. It said, "Hey there, boys." It was a man's voice, calm but somehow intimidating. Ryan looked at me, and I think he realized the same thing I did. It was the man from the hayride. He stepped into the light just enough for us to see part of him. Same black jacket and hat. "What are you two doing out here?" he asked. "You like candy?" Neither of us said anything. He pulled something out of his pocket and held it up. I could see the orange wrapper. It was a Reese's cup. "I got a bunch more of these in my cabin," he said. "Come on, I'll give you some." Ryan took a step back. I remember his face going pale. The man took a few steps closer and then said, "You don't have to be scared. It's Halloween. I'm just giving candy out. I saw you boys on the hayride earlier." When he said that, my stomach basically dropped. I grabbed Ryan's arm and whispered, "Run." We both turned and sprinted down the path toward the resort. I could hear him behind us for a second. His footsteps were pounding hard as he started to chase. I didn't dare look back. My heart was beating so hard it hurt. The path seemed longer than before. When we reached the edge of the woods, I could finally see the lights from the resort again. I yelled for help as we ran out of the trees and back toward the crowd near the bonfire. A few adults turned toward us, startled. We didn't stop until we got right up to the people. I turned around, expecting to see the man behind us, but he wasn't there. The path was empty. My parents came over right away, asking what happened. I told them everything, about the man watching me on the hayride, seeing him near the trees, and then following us into the woods. Ryan confirmed it all. My dad and another man grabbed flashlights and went to check the path, but they didn't find anyone. A few workers searched too, but he was gone. The resort staff called the local police to report what happened. They arrived about 30 minutes later and took statements from me, Ryan, and our parents. They said they'd check the area and notify nearby cabins to keep an eye out. That night, my parents didn't let me out of their sight. We stayed in the cabin with the door locked. I couldn't fall asleep for hours. Every noise outside made me jump. The next morning, the police came back and told us they searched the property but didn't find anyone matching the description. No vehicles had been reported missing, and no one fitting that man's description had checked in. They thought maybe he was a trespasser from outside the resort. We left later that day. I remember staring out the car window as we drove past the woods, half expecting to see him standing there again. For weeks after that, I kept thinking I saw him, on the side of the road, outside stores, even once at my school parking lot, but it was always someone else. Or at least, I hope it was. Ryan and I kept in touch for a while. He told me he couldn't sleep for days after it happened. Nothing ever came of this. The police never called again. The man was never identified or caught. Now I'm older, and when I think about that night, what scares me isn't what he did, it's what he could have done. If we had believed him for even a second, if we had walked toward him instead of running, I don't think I'd be here to tell this story. And every Halloween since then, whenever I see someone standing alone at the edge of a crowd, I always think of that man. Sometimes people who look like they're part of the fun are watching for a different reason.